Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you might be. We appreciate you joining us for today's office hours. Today, we are going to talk about setting up your roster for the upcoming season, what you can do to do it. We appreciate everybody joining in all the time. We do these office hours pretty regularly, at least try to go once every other week, sometimes weekly, kind of depends on the ebbs and flows of the seasons. We want to be the meet management service that you can rely on. Just so you know, we've got some upcoming ones next week. It'll be open office hours, so feel free to drop in with any of your questions or anything that you might have like that. Later on in that week, then we'll be talking about online entries and how to manage OME. And then again, the following weekend, open hours. And then here towards the end of the month, kind of to be determined on what we need. Today, I've got Scott Kitzman and Drew Peterson on board. They're going to lead you through how to manage your roster. If you do have questions, put them into the comments section. You'll be able to type them in, and we've set aside time throughout the course of the session in order to answer those questions. We do have an agenda today. We'll kind of go through an orientation of your roster, what it takes to edit a swimmer, bulk actions, how to manage your coaches, and just a touch on entries before we wrap up. With that, I want to introduce Scott Kitzman and Drew Peterson as part of our team. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott and let you take it away.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or evening, wherever it is you're joining us today. As we approach the beginning of the fall seasons, getting a good, clean, solid roster is of utmost importance. And with Swimcloud, it's really, really easy to do. So I'm going to share my screen here and go through some roster management. When you log into Swimcloud for managing, you're first presented with this screen. We have a manage button here. You get to managing your team through the manage button. You just work your way across the top. Here's a little bit about your team, some other things that you can do, team name, whatnot. But this morning, we're focusing in specifically on the roster. You'll notice a few things over here on the right. You have some selectors, some searches that you can do. So if we want to search for a swimmer, Jameson, we've got a couple James in here. You can filter for women or all. Additionally, the season selector is very important. Here in the United States, swimming seasons typically start August or September, and it's the same on Swimcloud. So your roster goes all the way back as far as we have results. Now you might be wondering, how does Swimcloud build my roster? We take meet result files and we parse them, and based on the data that's contained in those result files, we'll create your teams and also the swimmers on your team. Okay, so that's how all of these swimmers wound up in this team's roster. It comes from previous meet results. That's primarily the main focus here, is the way that you can search and filter for swimmers based on these criteria. Any questions thus far on rosters or searching and scrolling that anybody might have before we move on to the next section, which is editing? How does this work with Hy-Tek's Team Manager? That's a very good question. Hy-Tek Team Manager is a separate program. It resides specifically on your computer, and that's your database. When you do meet entries using Hy-Tek's Team Manager, and those result files come into Swimcloud, Swimcloud uses that data that's contained in your Team Manager database, and we compare it to the data that's in Swimcloud's database. And sometimes a duplicate swimmer may exist. For example, in Swimcloud, there might be a swimmer profile named Jonathan B. Smith with a date of birth of 1/1/2006. But in your Team Manager roster, you might have him as Johnny Smith, no date of birth, no middle initial. So when we get that result file from a meet that you've done entries for with that database, we can't match up Jonathan B. Smith to Johnny Smith. And so what will happen is you will get a duplicate swimmer. And I have a duplicate swimmer here on this roster, and we'll cover merging swimmers and managing them a little bit later on in the profile. But I hope that makes sense. Swimcloud uses data to compare the swimmers that exist to the swimmers that are on a meet result file. And we do our best to match them up, and sometimes we just can't, and we create a duplicate. I hope that answers the question. Okay, moving on, let's talk about editing your roster, because this roster is in need of some editing. We've got a couple different ways of doing it. We'll go over inline editing. Inline editing is exactly what it says here. So if we take Nathan Crow, if we know Nathan's date of birth, we just click the add button and put in his date of birth as whatever it is. This is a data point that Swimcloud uses to match up to data that comes in perhaps from a club team, another summer league team, or anything. Adding email. If you happen to know Nathan's email, put it in here. We strongly recommend adding a middle initial, the USA Swimming ID. And if you are a Swimcloud Pro user, you can input an email address for Nathan. And then you can use this email address to communicate specifics about your team, practice, whatever it is that you want. Same thing with a phone number. So adding phone, date of birth. You can also change classes. So we'll say Nathan's a sophomore, date of birth, add an email, phone number. That would be inline editing. Also on Swimcloud, we use the 3-dot edit menu often. You'll see these 3 dots strewn throughout Swimcloud, and it's a very powerful menu. You can click it and bring up a bunch of different things. So again, another way to get back to this edit box for Nathan Crow. Clicking here. We have roster tags. Roster tags are hugely, hugely powerful. We can create a roster tag. We'll just call this group 1. And you need to be a Swimcloud Pro user to tag your roster group. Let's say you've got a roster of 100, 150 kids, and you have different groups, practice groups or coach assignments or things like these. You can tag swimmers and assign them to groups. It makes managing a roster and doing meet entries, which we're going to cover later in the program, very, very simple. Additionally, this kid here, Duncan James, he graduated in 2024, so we can remove him from the active roster. And then last, activate video. Those Swimcloud Pro users, you have access to Swimcloud's video race analysis tools, and you can give this swimmer access to those tools by clicking this button here. So that is the 3-dot edit menu, and you will see this strewn throughout Swimcloud. Okay. Another thing that I want to show is how you go through and can make some selections here. So we already put Nathan in group 1. Go Jameson. As you select swimmers, you'll notice that some options appear up here. So we're going to add Jameson and Henry to group 1 as well, because we've already created group 1. And we're going to filter our roster. If I click on group 1, it's only going to bring up the 3 swimmers that are in group 1. Again, if we're a Swimcloud Pro user, we can then send an email to this group of swimmers. This just sends an email to group 1 roster, practice, whatever. And we've got mail merge functions. So, hey, swimmer first name, practice, blah, 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 blah. You get it. Okay. Very, very powerful feature. Come back over here to our roster, and let's get back to our full roster by just clicking on and off the tabs. Okay. Any questions about sort of editing your existing roster tags, that sort of stuff, as we before we move on to adding swimmers? Question just came up: can we merge athlete profiles? Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the very easy one here is we've got Bo Bray and we've got Bo Bray showing on this roster. So what we're going to do is we're going to click both of these. This is the multiple select. And we're going to click the merge button. And we've got data points. Which data point do we want to select? So we're going to say this is his date of birth, this is his name, and that's his zip code. Okay, click merge. Done. And now we have one Bo Bray with a date of birth of August 17th, 2006. While we're at it, let's go ahead and add him to group 2. So that's inline editing, 3-dot editing, and bulk actions. Another thing that you can do, speaking of bulk actions, this box up here, when you click it, it selects everybody in your roster. You can add everybody to a tag, send an email, or additionally, you can export your roster. Sometimes exporting your roster to a CSV is available to Swimcloud Pro users. You can export your roster to an HY3 file. In case you're going to a meet that wants your meet roster, this is how you would do that. Okay. Any questions about editing, whether inline, 3-dot, or the bulk actions here that we've shown? Okay. Hearing none, let's go through adding a swimmer. We got this giant blue button here that says adding a swimmer. There are a few different ways to get a swimmer onto your active roster. The easiest way is to upload past meet results. You can do so here. Clicking on this brings you to uploading a result file, or you can email result files to results@swimcloud.com. It's super, super easy. This is a result file that this coach has sent in previously. Once those result files are sent in, Swimcloud processes them. All the swimmers that are in that result file make their way onto your roster. But let's say that we've got a completely brand new swimmer. We can add them manually. So let's add a complete brand new swimmer who's never swum before. The swimmer's name is Sammy Sinker. Sammy Sinker, when you type a name, Swimcloud goes out and searches our database. This swimmer isn't found. So we're going to say, yeah, we're going to add this new swimmer. At this point, you have the opportunity to enter an email address. When you enter an email address, Swimcloud sends that swimmer an email inviting them to claim their profile. Select gender. So Sammy is a male. We're going to hit create. Sammy Sinker was added to your roster. And here he is. We could add a date of birth. Go and add, he's a freshman. Like so. And so now Sammy's ready to be entered into swim meets. Okay, let's go through another one. Sometimes you might pump in a swimmer that already exists. This is my son, Jack Kitzman. If Swimcloud finds a profile for a swimmer that already exists, you can add that swimmer to your roster. And doing so brings them on so that they can be used for meet entries as well. Okay, so that's adding swimmers, whether they exist in the Swimcloud database, they're completely brand new, or uploading from a meet result file. Are there any questions regarding this section here, sort of adding a swimmer, new swimmers, and things like that? No? Hearing none, let's move on. We've already merged swimmers. We've talked about exporting. I think of swimmers now. What about coaches? Okay, great point. This is a presentation about rosters, and a coaching roster is available for your team as well. That's accessible the same way. We're going to click our Manage button. We've got our coaches roster. You can see here we've got Jance Severns, and we've got myself. I added myself as a coach to the team. Each season, we encourage coaches to go through their coaching roster and clean it up as well. Scott's no longer with the team, so all we do is hit the delete button. And yes, we're gone. The reason that you want to have your coaching roster complete and up to speed is as meets get organized and administered on Swimcloud, meet administrators will use Swimcloud's email functionality to communicate meet specifics, entry deadlines, things like that. So we have another coach we want to add to our staff. Just click the big add staff. There you go. Mindy Kerr. And Mindy is the associate head coach. There's an email address for Mindy. It's important to put the email address in here. And then at the end, click add. And what Swimcloud is going to do, coach with that name and team already exists. Sometimes you get that message. If you do get that message, reach out to Swimcloud and we will help you. But put in an email so that when you hit the add button, Swimcloud's going to send an email to this coach so that they can complete their registration. They need to go through and set a password so that when they log in, they'll get it. And just a quick note then about coaches that are on your staff. Any coach that's on your staff has access to the team's roster. Swimcloud takes privacy, data integrity very, very seriously. There's an onboarding process for coaches because coaches have access to dates of birth, email addresses, and things like this. So we want to make sure that you're only adding people to your staff that should be added there. Okay. Any questions about adding coaches, removing coaches, anything like that with your coach roster or your team roster?
Looks like we have a question about how many coach logins a team subscription can have.
You're welcome to have as many as you would like, as many as you can manage. Again, keep in mind that any coach that you add has access to the roster groups here. So, like the old adage goes, sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen isn't always good, or maybe that's not how the saying is, but too many cooks might not be great. And if that's the case, you can remove them if they are here and they don't need to be. Also, each season, when you start each season and when you log in for that season's beginning, you're going to be presented with a list of coaches, and Swimcloud's going to ask, hey, here's your coaching roster. Is this good? You can say, yes, it looks good, or no, I want to edit it, and you can remove or you can add at that particular time. Another word about coaches, every coach on your staff has the ability to do meet entries. And I do want to get into meet entries and how having a good, clean roster here works for that. So now we're going to go over, since I think we've covered the rosters pretty well, let's go into how we would do a meet entry and use our roster effectively for a meet entry. Okay, we're going to come here and we're going to go, you can look for your meet that you're going to enter. This is the meet we're going to enter. Just click on it. One of the first steps you're going to want to do, we've got this meet coming up. There's 29 days left for entries, but we want to go to our swimmers tab and declare our roster. And Swimcloud tries to be very consistent in our user interface. You'll notice some of the same search features here on the right side that we offered on the team roster. Notice the tags that we created. So here's every swimmer on our team. We can filter our roster by just group one. So let's say that I'm the coach of Williamsburg that's responsible for Group 1. As the coach of Group 1, I can go in and say, yes, these swimmers are coming, and I can do entries for my swimmers that another coach down the road can approve or deny or anything. So here I am. I'm just doing entries for my swimmers for whom I'm responsible for. Clicking on their name, putting them in the events that I've coached them up to do, and away we go. I click on Group 1 again, they all come back. Anybody can see that Nathan Crow has 2 entries. Additionally, much like over in the team roster, you can multi-select, select all 28 people on your team. Go through and say, yes, Bo's coming, Ben's coming, Hank's coming, Brody didn't make grades, Cole made grades, yes, Jack's coming, on and on. We can filter the roster by those that are attending. So now I'm just dealing with the swimmers that are attending the meet. I can search for swimmers' names. So here's just Jack. I can do entries for Jack. Come back, clear this out, and look at everybody that's coming. Again, very, very easy, very intuitive. The menu, the search bar on the right-hand side mirrors the search bar that's on the right side of your team roster. And for those of you that have not used Swimcloud for meet entries, it's in the cloud. You're not anchored to one PC that's running your team manager database that might be at the pool. Coaches can collaborate. As I mentioned earlier, the coach who's in charge of Group 2 can go ahead and filter the Group 2 and do the entries for those swimmers. Or Group 1, or I'm the head coach and I'm responsible for everybody. I can come through here and do these entries, review these entries, however it is that I want. Makes it very, very simple, very collaborative, auditable, and very, very easy. Any questions about rosters and using the roster that you've created on the team side over to how it works on the meet side? See, Charlie, can I use Swimcloud for entries at a meet using Hy-Tek? Yes, absolutely. Swimcloud was built and designed to play nice with everybody in the pool. We can import entry files from Team Unified, Team Manager, Swimtopia, Splash, which is used over in Europe. We can bring those entries in, you can massage them, and then we can additionally export entries out. So let's say I'm attending this meet that's going to be run on Hy-Tek's Meet Manager. Great. Remember, we talked earlier about the 3-dot edit menu. What I'm going to do is review my entries here. I'm okay, I'm good. This is everything that I want. I can review by events, swimmers. I'm going to take my team 3-dot edit menu. I'm going to export this entry file. It's going to create an old school HY3 file that you need to then go to your downloads folder and email off to the meet host, and there are your entries. It's perfectly great. Now, I want to take a minute and explain this submit button. If I click submit, or when I click submit, this really is for meets that are being administered and run on Swimcloud. When a meet is entries are being accepted on Swimcloud and run on Swimcloud, we strongly suggest that you hit the submit button. Doing so will trigger an email back to the coach that submitted the entries, along with a copy of a PDF entry report. So it's proof that, yes, you did your entries, I've got it here. And so that if down the road somebody says you didn't get your entries in on time, you can say, yeah, here I did, here's the receipt, everything's good. None of that stuff, some of those horror stories that we've seen over the years, or like what's going on in some of these other organizations that some teams have been disallowed from participating because a coach didn't get their entries in on time. We want to avoid that. So Swimcloud makes it easy to do that. So yes, you can import an entry file, export an entry file. You can print your entries. Here's your entry report here. An entry matrix. We put the events across the top. swimmers down the side. Split sheets. Again, we make it very easy. You want to add a line, blank line. The thing with Swimcloud, folks, get in and play with it. You can't hurt anything. The only thing that you can do is learn, get more comfortable, get out of your comfort zone, much like you tell your swimmers, get comfortable being uncomfortable. We try to make it easy for you. Coaching is hard enough. Running your team, managing your roster, doing meet entry should not be hard at all. And with Swimcloud, we think that we've helped you to do that more effectively and much easier. Any questions at all covering the team roster, the meet roster, any of that? There's a contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me or Drew with any questions whatsoever. What I've shown you here for Swimcloud is for one team, and it's excellent for one team. You want to talk about getting your whole conference or region or section or state on Swimcloud, then that's where the true power of Swimcloud and the data comes in. It's great for one team, but when you get all teams doing it and using it and collaborating and competing, it just brings everybody up a whole nother level. So please reach out to me or Drew. Our contact information is right here. Drew, you want to add anything? Greg, did I forget?
I think you hit on everything. Appreciate you guys being here. And like Scott said, feel free to reach out to us if you have questions or want to learn more about other products that we have.
And again, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're at. Again, we do these office hours at swimcloud.com/office hours. Next one coming up is just going to be open forum. So Q&A, you can quiz us if you have challenges. Obviously, if you have any help, you need customer support, we are here for you. But we appreciate you joining us this morning and look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Thank y'all. Take care.